بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. Tonight will probably be the last class for the chapter of the Janazah. The section is short. So it's only a chapter, and in the book, the actual text is only like 6 pages. Not even 6 pages. So again, the book is summarized. It's not a long, detailed book. All of the issues are not mentioned here, but it's like that intentionally. In the English translation, we're on page 68, carrying and burying the deceased. So we already did the preparing the body, the washing of the body, the wrapping the body, praying over the body. And now we do the carrying of the body, carrying the deceased and burying the deceased. So the author, rahimahullah, he says, Sunnah tarbi'un fi hamliha wa isra'un wa kawnu mashin amamaha wa raqibin li hajatin khalfaha. So now he mentions when it's time to carry the body to the grave, some things that are sunnah. Sunnah meaning what? Recommended. So if a person doesn't do it, they're not sinful. Yeah, that's better. Why is that better? We should always try to do the sunnah. Because it's not obligatory doesn't mean we shouldn't do it or we shouldn't give some urgency to doing it. But if a person doesn't do it, if they forgot, they skipped it, they didn't have time to do it, then it's not something that is considered sinful. Number one, tarbi'un fi hamliha, that the body should be carried. 4 people. 4 people should carry the body. Meaning, of course, the nash or whatever it is, as we know, the box is a rectangle. So that means at the edge of each corner is a person. 4 corners, each person is on a corner, right? At 4 people. Now, that means if less than that carried it, then it's not a problem. La bas. But the sunnah is that 4 people carry it. He doesn't go into detail of how that works because, let me ask y'all, at a janazah, when it's time to carry the body, right? When they say we need help with the body, do you see a lot of people rushing over there to grab the body to carry it? Not really. You do? Alhamdulillah. If you do, that's good. That's khair. It's good to carry it. I've been in a lot of janazahs and it's time they ask, we say we need some help carrying the body, and people standing around looking at each other. Right? Maybe people think that only close family can carry it, so they just fall back. Sometimes they might think that, maybe their family's here, they don't want to step on as we say, step over no boundaries or nothing like that. But like at the haram, it's a janazah after every salat, all day long. When it's time to carry the body, you can really see what he didn't mention here, because it's not like the same 4 people carry the body the whole way. It's a rotation. So you might be on a corner, right? You might rotate to the back corner, you rotate to this corner, then you get off, and somebody else takes it in. So nobody's never really overburdened with carrying the body, because if possible, you want to walk the body from where we at to the graveyard, if possible. That's why it says it's also recommended sunnah isra'un, to hurry up, to do it quickly, not do it reckless, possibly drop the deceased. But we are in a organized rush. We're not in a reckless rush. We're in an organized rush. We're not dragging this out. It's a process. We want to get to it. If the person, as the Prophet said, if they're waiting on a reward, then we want to give them to the reward. And if they're waiting on a punishment, if they get ready to get punished, then we want to do what? We want them to get them off our shoulders. Tayyib. He says, وَكَوْنُ مَاشٍ أَمَامَهَا. It's recommended to walk in front of, when they carrying the body, who's ever carrying the body, we taking the body to the grave. To walk if you're in front of it. And that's what I mean. It's generally to be walked. If it's possible, you can walk. Now, let's just say, for example, the graveyard is on 48th and Lancaster. 4 people can carry a body from here on their shoulders, from here to 4 different lengths. Possibly, but it's going to be a task, at the say the least. So in that case, you will see people rotate, right, in order to make it easier and to get the body there. And also more people get the reward. So if a person is walking, then Sunnah recommended to walk in front of the body. And if a person is riding, then he says, وَرَاكِبٌ لِحَاجَةٍ, that if a person has a necessity to ride, like what? Maybe they're handicapped, they can't walk that far, or maybe the graveyard is just too far, right? We don't have really graveyards in walking distance. So most of us drive anyway. That the rider should be behind the actual janazah, like we do. We basically get in the line. You got the hearse in the front, and then everybody follows back. He says, وَقُرْبٌ مِنْهَا, and everybody should be close to the body as possible. Everything should be close. Sometimes we get in the line, and we like, I'm gonna just meet them over there, right? I'm gonna just meet them. Where they going to? You can call around. Are they going to the 6-9? I'm gonna just meet them there, right? You can, but Sunnah is to follow the procession and stay close as possible to the body. طيب. And now he says, وَكَوْنُ قَبْرٍ لَحْدًا. Now you're talking about the grave. Inside of the grave, it should be a niche, if you can say. Let me see how you translate it. Oh yeah, niche. Like, everybody know what a niche is? A niche. A niche is basically
section like cut into the grave.
Into the wall of the grave, like. So if you look down in the grave, it's basically 4 dirt walls. Tell you, inside of a dirt wall, it's another section cut out. So that the body goes down and in the dirt wall. It's deep, ain't it? Tell you.
Overseas like that, they don't really do that here. Maybe once.
I've seen it before, but I don't know what. I don't know if it's the cemetery. They have restrictions, right. Or maybe the people don't do it.
We talked about this before. I actually watched this before. You said it was like private cemetery.
It's possible the cemetery has restrictions. It's possible maybe, I don't know. They don't know have anybody to do it. I don't know. If they didn't do it, because a lot of times it's not done. It's not gonna. Again, it's recommended. It's not going to affect the burial or anything like that. طيب. He says also, Sunnah, for the person who's putting the body into the grave, the brothers that are down there, to say Bismillah wa ala millati Rasulillah, right? To make this dua. If they don't say it, it's not sinful. They're not sinful. Because again, it's a situation where people are emotional. A lot's going on, depending on the situation. Sometimes the janazah could be a little rowdy, a little loud, you know. So sometimes people forget. And then they climb out and they say, oh, I forgot to say the dua. Right? If that was the case and they forgot, then inshallah, that's no problem. It's not going to affect the burial. طيب. He says, وَلَحْدُهُ عَلَى شَقِّهِ أَيْمَنٍ. That the lah itself should be on the right side of the grave. On the right side, the niche should be on the grave on the right side. وَيَجِبُ اسْتِقْبَالُهُ الْقِبْلَةِ, and that the person should be facing the qibla. The deceased is facing the qibla up in that niche. All right? Everybody get it?
Question, what's the right side?
What you mean? On the right side.
On our right side or on the deceased right?
On the deceased. The deceased should be on the right, and they should be facing. Do we know what the qibla is? Everybody know what the qibla is? It's not a trick question. What's the qibla? Facing toward the Kaaba. So they should be facing toward the Kaaba on their right side, which is generally the prayer direction. The way we pray is the qibla. The qibla is the direction. We're praying towards the Kaaba. In that area, that direction is called the qibla. So they're on the right side. Face is facing the qibla up in that niche. So in reality, if you look down, if they were in the niche and you would look down in the grave, depending on how deep the niche was, then you might just see just the back of the body.
So these would be like
are you supposed to be on their like on their arms in the neck or on their back in the neck?
On the right side, on their right side, on the right side of the grave, everything on the right, facing the qibla. Salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now he goes into some things that are disliked. Disliked. Which is on page 69. It says here, the word disliked, it says it is offensive, meaning disliked. All right. The word offensive is used in the translation. It is offensive for those accompanying the procession. Tayyib. Kuriha is dislike or offensive without a need. If there's no need for these things, we shouldn't be doing. If it becomes a need for somebody to do one of these things, then it's not considered something that is sinful, based on that it's a haja. So he says, Kuriha bila haja julus tabi'iha qabla wad'iha. Is dislike, or let's say offensive, for the people that are following the janazah, right? What happens when we get to the graveyard? Everybody does what?
Right.
Everybody surrounds the grave and prepares to bury the grave. They say it's dislike to the people that follow the janazah to sit down before the janazah is placed in the grave. Right? All of this is out of ihtiram for the deceased. That the Muslim carries or is always is respected. The respect for the Muslim is while we're living and after we're dead. Out of respect for the deceased, that a person stands until the body is put in the grave. Tayyib. He said with tajsis qabrin, and to decorate the graves, also to decorate the graves. And the wording used is offensive. Some have went further and say that it is haram, decoration on the graves. Right? We're just going with how the author words the book, because the author is this is his, based on, because some of the issues that have differences, he puts in the book what he sees to be correct, which is no problem. So he says dislike the decorate the graves, also to build them up and make them these high decorated things, like this graveyard right here, by after the graveyard right there by Claire Muhammad on 58th Street. 47th Street, that big graveyard. If you ever ride by and pay attention, you see them big houses like built on top of them. All of this leads to what? Shirk. All of this leads to extremism and ghulu, extreme when it comes to praising the dead, right? And that's why they say the Islamic burial is so simple, right? It's simple. It's simple, but it's with respect and honor for the deceased still. With respect and honor for the deceased. And that's like the issue of if the person was a known sinner, right? We spoke about that. If the person was a known sinner, they're not a good Muslim, they're not deening, and somebody says, should we go pray for him? Should we? Or can we?
Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to.
Yes, you should pray over. And there's some.
Tell you, somebody's a sinner openly, no shyness. They all over the internet with it. They don't care about none of that. They honest. They say they Janazah tomorrow. Hey, they're Muslim. Do we pray over them or no?
Yeah, you pray over. You pray over.
Do we have to pray over them?
We all don't have to, but somebody has to.
Then if nobody don't pray over them, then it's a sin on all of us, because it's hard for somebody.
Oh yeah, gee, that's how we got to get to that. Yeah. Because we use words like should, somebody should. We gotta get to what's the hukum. We want to know, can somebody pray over them? No, not can somebody. Somebody has to pray over them. Or the Muslims who don't, that are able to in that area, are all simple. So it's not should we. Somebody has to pray over them. Now that wasn't the issue. The issue was, like mentioned in the explanation, that yeah, okay, sometimes certain figures might not go to certain prayers because they don't want to be connected to it or something like that. But at the same time, like the ulama say, that the one who is sinning like that they're in more need of the dua, right? They're in more need of the dua than the person who we would consider to be upright and dean and righteous. They need dua too, but if a person is openly sinning, we sure that they may be in more need of the dua. So he says to also build those graves up. He says writing on the graves, to write on the actual graves, also dislike. Walking on them, meshyun, to walk on them. And we should know that this is important etiquette when we go to the graveyard. We don't just walk over people's graves. Not us Muslims, we don't do that. We should be paying attention to where the graves, they got rows where we can walk at, sectioned off. We don't just go there and walking over stuff and then act like it's not a big deal. We're staying there and then we stepping on people's grave and things like that. He says, وَجُلُوسٌ عَلَيْهِ, to sit on a grave. To sit on it also is something that is disliked. This here, he says also, to place anything in the grave touched by fire or made of iron. Allahu A'lam. I'm not sure what that means. Allahu A'lam. Idkhalu shay'an masathu an-nar. What could that possibly be? Allahu A'lam. Tayyib. All of these things are disliked. Some say haram, sinful. Tayyib. According to the author, all of these are disliked. The next thing he says, with tabassum. Where we at right now? We at the grave. Bury somebody. Somebody's going back to meet their Lord. Somebody's going to get questioned. The angels going to come when everybody leaves. They say, is this like to smile? We out there shucking and jiving at the Janazah, let alone anything else we out there talking about. People fighting, people getting high, people listening to music, people going live at a Janazah. Pulling guns out, all types of stuff. No respect for, people say no respect for their family, no respect for the deceased, right? He said, dislike to smile. It's not a time for that. The person get ready to get questioned, that their akhiras get ready to start when they start getting questioned. Dislike to smile. It says, وَحَدِيثٌ بِأَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا عِنْدَ, or to speak about anything of worldly, anything that has to do with this world. Anything outside of what we're doing is dislike to be talking about. All of that, we only going to be here for approximately maybe 45 minutes, right? 45 minutes, the body will be lowered into the ground. Everybody has shoveled everything on top, the dirt on top of the body, and everybody walked away. Maybe an hour. That all the conversation should be held until afterwards, if it's that important. But yeah, so he says these are the things that are disliked. He says, وَحَرُمَ دَفْنُ اثْنَيْنِ فَأَكْثَرْ فِي قَبْرٍ إِلَّا لِلضُّرُورَةِ. It is not permissible to bury more than one person in the grave, except for out of dire necessity. Out of a dire necessity, like what? Maybe a war, or say it again. Yeah, that it's not permissible to bury two people in the same grave, except if it's a necessity. It's a necessity, right? Durura, like extreme necessity. Maybe war, right? And it's a lot of dead bodies at one time. Or they even say maybe like during the time of a plague. And a lot of people are dying real quick, right? A lot of people are dying at a high rate. In this case, this is what can be considered a durura, a dire necessity. Not just because some people just want to be buried with their spouse or something like that, right? We Muslim, right? Sometimes you with me. It's stuff that people do. Say, I want to be buried with my grandma, something like that, or they want to be buried with whoever. But the Muslim, we have to make sure that we do everything according to the legislation. And the Janazah by itself, this whole chapter by itself, is a heavy, heavy separation when it comes to families. When it comes to death and Janazahs, this one it gets sticky in the family. Because we don't have these conversations with our families that are not Muslim. So now when it comes time for a funeral, one of their funerals, right? We have a lot of things that we say we don't participate in, right? They got a problem with that. We never had conversation about it. We don't explain it to them because a lot of times we don't know how to explain. We don't even know why. I ain't doing that. No, that's Bata. That's this. And the time with people are grieving. طيب. Or if it's a janazah, we don't even explain to the people what's going on. You Muslim, you gotta get out. You ain't Muslim, you gotta get out the way. But that ain't how we do our stuff. We just got this attitude as if because we're doing what we're doing, it doesn't mean we're supposed to be ignorant, disrespectful, and rude. Islam doesn't teach us that. And there's nothing prohibiting us from educating non-Muslims on how we do our funeral procedure. If a non-Muslim came in here right now and said, I want to sit in the class and learn about the janazah that y'all do, what would be the problem? Right? We don't know them from a can of paint. If they come and they want to sit in the janazah class every Friday, what's the issue? It's no issue. They can sit here and learn. They should. And that's the conversation we need to be having with our families. So when it's time for the janazah, right, it's not a surprise and nobody knows what's going on. And then it's a big problem because the mothers or the parents say, I raise them like this or I raise her like that, and that's how I'm gonna bury her. I don't know about all that. We're not doing that. And then it's a whole argument, right? And that can cause bigger problems in the family. Tell you. So we don't bury two people in the grave unless it's a serious need for it, not just something we always wanted to do since we were kids or something like that, right? طيب, he says nextly, وأي قربة فعلت وجعل ثوابها لمسلم حي أو ميت نفعه. This is another issue that when a person dies, people say, you know what? I'm gonna do this deed for this person that's dead. So, for example, I'm gonna make Hajj for a deceased family member. Family member died, they never got to make Hajj. I'm gonna make Hajj for them. Right? He says here that any type of worship that is done and the intention is for the Muslim that has already passed away, that the one that's passed away will get that benefit. Clear? I'm just using an example for Hajj, for example. That a Muslim dies and then a person comes and they say, you know what? This brother died. We grew up together. He never got to make Umrah, or she never got to make Umrah. Right? I already made Umrah. I made Umrah twice. My next Umrah I'm gonna make, and the reward is for Fulan or Fulana. It says here, any pious act performed by a Muslim with its reward or part of it donated to a living or deceased Muslim will be beneficial to obtaining the reward. طيب. Some argue that is that for every type of worship or just for the worship that the Dalil points to? Because there's some worship that is specific that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, like Sadaqah, Hajj. Is that restricted to the Dalil or for any type of worship? According to the author, he says, Ayu Qurba. He says for any type of worship.
Does he talk about like crying at the grave?
Yes. Yes, inshallah. You'll talk about that. طيب. Oh, and this is what we did, right? معلش. I don't need it. I'm not going to use them, so I ain't take them out. معلش. Yeah. طيب. Next he says, Sunnah li rijal ziyaratu qabr Muslim. Is recommended, is sunnah for the men to visit the grave of a Muslim. طيب. For who? For the men. What about for the women? Can the women go to the grave? Is it permissible for women to visit the graves? He says yes. طيب. The ulama differ. It's important, y'all. When we say the ulama differ, that's not an open pass to just do what you want to do. The benefit of knowing the scholars differ so that when we see people that we pump our brakes and don't jump to conclusions and consider people doing something wrong because we're not educated on it. It's not an open path. I'm gonna just do it like this because scholars differ. It doesn't mean that. Well, it does mean that everybody has dalil, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's dalil is strong. Right? Some people they have proof, but it doesn't necessitate that their proof is really that strong. So it's not like they're going off with nothing. But when you start getting into the dalil, you start looking at it and comparing. If you really do a real research like it's supposed to be done, and start comparing and looking and what are they using, what's the verse they use, what's the hadith, when you start getting into all of that, you come to see that, okay, that one is not really that strong. To you, it's not. Like we did. We sat in here, and this is a summarized research on the issue. It's summarized. It's about 10 pages, maybe, or a little more. It's no more than 15 pages. It's about 10 pages. And even with that, it's summarized, right? And once you get into it, you start saying, wow, that's not as strong as I thought it was when you hear the other opinions. So some say it's allowed for the women to visit the graves with their dalil. We're not going to go into all of that. Some say it's haram, not allowed for women to visit the graves with their dalil. And some say it's disliked for the women to visit the graves with their dalil. Which one is the strongest? The sheikh here, he said. Huh? Why what? Maybe we'll do that by itself. Maybe we'll read this. Inshallah, we'll do this by this right here. We'll just read this by itself and make a whole class out of it. Just the issue, like we did for the wali and the wakil, and just make it a benefit and just go through. This is detail. Like this is a little too much detail for this. It's a little more detail, too detailed for this type of sitting. But yeah, we'll do that, inshallah. Yeah, because it affects our community. Brothers, a lot of times we go to the Janazah and they say, man, they shout out the women out there. The women was out there. That's why I don't go down there and pray. When it's a bunch of ulama, scholars that are already, some say permissible, no problem for them to go. Some say they can go as disliked, and some say it's haram. Now, based on your opinion, you go with that, but you can't really, you act like they're going off of nothing, like they don't have anything Islamically to follow. So, inshallah, we'll read through this by itself and make that a class by itself because it is worth it. Ikhtiyarat. That's from Ikhtiyar Shaykh al-Islam. They're doing nice. طيب. For the men, طيب. He says also والقراءة عنده والقراءة عنده وعنه تقرأ. Also, he says it is also recommended to read the Quran at the grave, and some say that is disliked. This is another issue that the scholars argue about. Reading Quran at the grave. And that was another issue about reading. One issue was reading when the person is on their deathbed. This issue is reading at the grave. And some ulama have classified this as bid'ah, innovation, for not having any firm dalil for it. Even with that, even though like the explanation has it as it's a bid'ah, right? Because the author put an issue in here that's considered innovation to other people, right? Oh, that's the clock. I don't know how to mute it. No. Because the author puts an issue in the book that's considered innovation by others, right? It doesn't take away from the author because he sees it to be recommended, right? So you don't say what? Burn all of the author. This author burn all of his books because he said you can read the Quran at the graves. MashaAllah. It doesn't go like that. He says also, Sunnah wa ma yukhaffifu anhu. If we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the two men were being tortured in the grave, and he did what? Anybody know? What did he do? He put a stick on the grave in order to do what? He said, out of hopes that Allah will lighten their punishment as long as this stick is fresh, right? Tayyib. He says that it's also sunnah to do that. Other scholars have said no, that was specifically for the Prophet ﷺ. Why? They say because how do you know? The Prophet ﷺ, number one, he knew at that point that those people were being tortured in the grave. So when we walk up to a grave, how do we know if the person's being tortured or not to say that they need this? So they say no, that was something specific for the Prophet ﷺ. And as the ulama do, they don't go back and change the author's book and scratch the whole John out and say, no, he made a mistake here. I'm etched that out. Are we gonna put this? No, you respect the author's work and they come back, and when they explain the author's work, they'll correct the author's work. They'll correct that. That this is specific for, and that's the benefit of the explanations of books. This is specifically for the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because he knew that the people were being tortured in the grave. Therefore, that is specific for the Messenger ﷺ. And there are many things Islamically that were specific for the Prophet ﷺ, right? And we won't get into that. طيب. He says, just like walau bija'al jarida rutba fil qabr. Even if a person does like the Prophet ﷺ did in that hadith, and they put like a twig or a branch there on the grave. طيب. He says also sunnah wa qawlu za'ir wa marin bihi assalamu alaykum dar qawm al-mu'minin wa inna insha'Allah bikum lahikun yarhamullah المستقدمين منكم والمستأخرين نسأل الله لنا ولكم العافية اللهم لا تحرمنا أجرهم ولا تفتنا I'm sorry ولا تفتنا بعدهم واغفر لنا ولهم. For the person either visiting the grave, which is who? The men or the women? Depending on what position you take. For the visitor to the grave to make this dua, or the person who intentionally goes to the grave to make the dua, or the person who just passes by a graveyard, right? Meaning you might not intentionally be going to visit a grave, but you might ride past a graveyard where you know the Muslims buried, to make that dua, which is on page 69. It is on page 69. طيب. طيب. Lastly, I'm sorry, that dua, y'all, is on page 70. And it can be found in Fortress of the Muslim also. If we don't know how important Fortress of the Muslim is, that's a major book. It's a serious book with a lot of du'as in it that we could be using every day. He says also, تعزية المصاب بالميت سنة ويجوز البكاء عليه. It is also sunnah recommended to console for when a person's family is afflicted with death. But what's the word we use? Like what's no condolences, yeah. Like to go send your condolences to the family. Some of us think that when a person dies, right, a Muslim dies, or a Muslim, right, a Muslim family, they lose a family member. The ta'ziyah is that we go to the family that's still here, that are dealing with death, and we send our condolences, which could be what? Dua for the family, or y'all never do that to people? Y'all send condolences to people? How do you send condolences? Maybe a card, right? Food, right? The issue is not mentioned here, but also food, to prepare food for the family. They're doing what? They're dealing with death, number one. They're dealing with preparing a janazah because in reality, not reality, but if you're able to, the janazah should be prepared for like ASAP. So let's figure for the next 2 or 3 days, maybe in 3 days, if possible, the body will be buried. So during those 3 days to prepare food and take it to the family. So that's one less thing they have to worry about, to send our condolences. And he didn't give any more detail. It's a lot of detail to that. As far as a Muslim losing a non-Muslim family member, right? A non-Muslim family member losing a Muslim family member, right? A Muslim family member losing a Muslim family member. We leave it like the book, like the author left it, inshallah. And again, if need be, we can move to another book and do like a level 2 book of the same chapter. The scholars, they do the same books, not like belittling it, but it's a way to learning, a way to seeking knowledge. And they'll do the book, the low book, the introductory level book. And once you get that, and you master that, then they'll move to the next book where it has the same information here in level 2 book, but it's a little more detail, right? And I think we spoke about this before. And then once you get that, you go to the level 3 book where it has what's in level 1 and level 2 with a little more detail. You don't have to do everything and jam everything in one book. If that was the case, the author wouldn't have did that. He has books that are bigger than this, but he wrote this book like this intentionally, right? طيب. He says also, and it is permissible to cry. ويجوز البكاء عليه. It is permissible to cry. We humans. Is it a reason you asked that question?
Because a lot of Muslims in the community in our city that say stuff like you can't cry, you can't. They say you can't. But people don't. A lot of people don't know the difference between crying and railing. So they see somebody crying, they go, "Oh, you make me crying." You feel like you said, with human at the end of the day. So.
Well, the issue of wailing is the last thing that he spoke about. That is, as it says, it is unlawful to wail. Wail is not a regular cry. Wail is like loud people. Yeah, all that kind of people falling down, and it's not. But we have to be mindful, and part of it is understanding the qadr. Part of it is before you even get to the janazah. It's our aqidah. What do we believe? Right? That Allah only took that person because it was decreed for that person to die at that time. We have no say in that. We're sad, of course. It hurts. But we have to make sure we stay within the boundaries. It's permissible to cry. But the stuff that he mentions here, to tear one's clothing. A person is crying so bad, they're tearing their clothes off. All right? Does that sound crazy? Huh? Have you ever seen somebody do something like that? Or does that sound far-fetched outside? That sound far-fetched? Imagine.
I used to see that a lot. But is that common over there? Because I know it's not common over here. So.
Tearing the clothes. A guy, he's mad, right? He's at the janazah and he's upset and he's crying. And he does what? He rips his t-shirt off. People do all kinds of stuff. Tearing clothes, that's the type of prohibition. Going to the point where you're doing like, it's a sad scene, but it's like extra. That's like overboard. You ripping your clothes. Everybody's gonna cry. People cry. Some people cry and they do fall. They pass out. Some people, right? Screaming, wailing, as he says here, to strike one's cheeks, smacking yourself in the face, and right, that kind of stuff might be specific to the area. People grabbing their cheeks and scratching their face and stuff like that. We might not see that kind of thing, but we do see people screaming and falling and possibly ripping their clothes and things like that. He says to pull out one's hair, pulling their hair out or shaving it, trying to make a statement or something like that. Those type of things that are not lawful. As all of this goes back to, again, it goes back to what we believe, that nobody dies except by Allah's permission. And everybody dies with a specific appointed time. Everybody gets a specific amount of years. So when death comes, part of understanding it, and death was dealt with a little different in the other countries. It's not dealt with a little different. But I would assume that's based on understanding who Allah is, and that Allah is in control, and the belief in the qadr, and that nothing escapes Allah's knowledge. And when we understand that and we live with it, when death comes, even though it hurts, it gives us some boundaries to behave by, right? Sometimes you go to janazahs, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're Muslim, or, like the people there, you don't know if they're Muslim or not, the way they're behaving. They're saying why. They're asking, why did he have to die? Why did she have to die? Right? They may be saying things that go against the Islamic belief. So you might not know if they're Muslim. Say Muslim? Yeah. Right? So we got to be careful. Lastly, this section here is not actually in the text, but it is mentioned in some of the explanations. But it says the dead know their visitors on Friday before the sun rises. The dead, they know their visitors on Friday before the sun rises. Honestly, it's not in the metin. It's in here. It's the last paragraph. It's not in the metin, but it's enrolled. It's not here in the original text that I have. Maybe it's another. He might have translated from another. With that in it. Tayyib. That in itself is the end of the chapter of the Janazah, the funeral prayers. Inshallah, Allah give us the tawfiq to implement this. Any questions? We're going to try to do. Nah, but I think that's worthy of doing a what's the name like this. Yeah, maybe. This might be maybe two separate ones. Meaning making condolences when somebody died for the non-Muslims and stuff like that. That whole issue of when a person dies and condolences for the family, that's an issue. That's an issue we need to deal with because we're affected by it, and we need to understand. A lot of times we cut our families and stuff off and make bigger problems in our family, and it's not really necessary.
So, I always say, is this you have general for the people that die, whether they Muslim or not Muslim, the one two rows, that's what Muslims will say.
Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Yes, that's in death. Yeah, musiba.
You first hear about it.
And the musiba, yeah. When some type of affliction, most of the time it's used for death. Allah Alam, it's restricted to death.
So, like when you said that it is too far, you could say like, you know a lot of people that you might work with or friends that you might not be Muslim. You just say like, oh, you know, I'm not passing away.
What is we know? Do we know what that means? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Tayyib. Non-Muslim, Muslim, men, women, children, old, young. That dua applies, right? I thought you was talking about another dua, but since you didn't mention it, I'm not gonna mention it. No, that's cool. That's fine. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, what we'll do is maybe next week we'll just deal with the issue of visiting the graves for the women by itself, a separate one just for the women. We'll just go through this. I don't know if we're gonna be able to finish it all in one class though. Oh yeah, next week Tom is going back on Sunday. So since Tom is going back on Sunday, everything it'll be the same time. It'll just be after Isha, but it'll be the same time. 6:30, 6:45 maybe. It'll be the same time. Yeah, all right. Just keep going. When you gonna do what's name? You wanna do the Ta'ziyah? You, yeah. Sheikh, I'm doing this one. Tayyib. We might do, we probably won't be able to do this in one class. So maybe what we'll do is, in this small research, it is this. Nah, man. We're going to do it. We got to do it. Right? This is a good jump. It's already summarized, but we can summarize it even more. But this is summarized, y'all. This is summarized, but it's good. So maybe we'll do first next week about the women visiting the graves, the first position, because he mentions three positions. And the first one is ibaha, the permissibility of women visiting to graves. So we'll do that, and then if need be. Go through. I'm gonna let you look at this first before we, you know what I'm saying? Is it long? It's long? Yeah. It's long. All right. Well, we'll make that for one for visiting the graves and the other one for visiting condolences for the non-Muslim and the families, and two separate. It says, what's the book you're reading from? This is called Hanbali Acts of Worship from Ibn Balban's the Supreme Synopsis. It's available on Amazon. it's available on Amazon. Humbly Acts of Worship. Supreme Synopsis. I think that's it. Alhamdulillah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.